Welcome to episode 400 of the Barcelona Podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and he's Emile Evanesian. And Emile, did I just say 400? That feels like a whole lot of shows.
I realized it when I saw the email that you sent me earlier, and I was like, this is a milestone show. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I should do for this milestone show is update everybody that I did speak to Frances, as always, the OG Frances Tomas, and he is very busy. He is doing a bunch of things. Like he said last time, he's still working on his master's dissertation, which seems a bit too complicated. He even sent me a few pages, and I can tell you, just trying to read through that for a minute or 2 minutes time let me know that he was much too busy. But someday, he will be attending many of the World Cup games. I think he has 5 in the first week or something that he's attending or something. So we will have him on coming closer to or during that World Cup break.
That's crazy.
We've been there on as watching the game, so that'll be exciting to do. Anyway, as far as the other 400 shows, I want to thank everyone as well at the top of this for just being with us on this journey. 400, that means that even if we did one per day, it would take more than a year and a half to do all this podcasting. So, or
if someone just started listening right now and just did one show a day, it would be at least November of next year before they were done.
Yeah, and I can tell you, though, if you do go back and try to do that, there are times in the Valverde era that are going to be rough. There are going to be times in the Quique Setien era that are going to be rough. There are going to be times during the Koeman era that are going to be rough. And hopefully this show does not get added to that pile of rough shows. But yes. I feel like we're not going to be that complimentary of Barcelona.
No, I mean, I think there's enough to kind of dig into. There's enough to sort of take some positivity into this brutal week that's coming up. But I mean, I don't think we're riding too high. I don't think we're going to set ourselves up to look, particularly silly and overly optimistic.
No, not necessarily. And then the last point of business, so really before we dig into the Celta review, the 1-0 win against Celta de Vigo at home, is that, the audio sounds a little bit different. If you are watching on video, you're going to notice that I am it's not a new location, but I'm back in Pennsylvania where I originally grew up, and I'm at my mother's house. So we've got a different background. And again, nice. The mic is a little bit different. It's not my normal setup, so it's my travel mic. And so that's why audio sounds a little bit different. If you're watching on video, you're seeing something you've never seen before. But either way, as long as the internet is good, we are in a little bit of an internet wasteland, but still, we're going to get through it. We're going to do the show. So let's jump right in. And as I'm saying, I'm hoping the internet is more inspired than what Barcelona were yesterday, because I would call that, Emile, an uninspiring performance. Another one in the Liga, by the way, another uninspiring performance that does indeed, though, lead to a clean sheet and 3 points. But it, again, is a third straight ho-hum, not great from the international break game. And so I even saw Jimmy Easton had tweeted after the game that there was actually a discussion that's going on online, that's going on in our heads, but it was physically going on between two groups of supporters. One group saying, this is rough, this is bad, we're not playing well, and that is a worrying sign for Wednesday against Inter Milan. That means that Barcelona are going to have trouble because they just cannot put it together. They're not playing well right now, they're not playing well enough, and they're in trouble. Then there was the other contingent that said, hey, today was about rotating, today was about getting players some rest, it was about getting Frankie de Jong a little bit of a run out, it was about resting Dembele, and it was about playing, this back line that is made of nothing, and throwing them out there while Sergio Roberto continues to rest. And not to say that we'll do Sergio Roberto later, but not to say we're putting everything on Roberto and Garcia, but they were rested a bit, did not start. And so we saw this makeshift back line. And so there is this contingent that also said, hey, this was about suffering. This was about getting the 3 points. And the silver lining is that these are the kind of games that I know as Barcelona played poorly. If you watch that Adafe Real Madrid match, Real Madrid won 1-0. They got an early goal, and then that one was as ugly as this one was. So
it's that was not a brutal performance too. It's not like they didn't light up Getafe.
So it's not like Real Madrid also conquered the world and did these great things heading into El Clasico next week or their Champions League midweek either. So all that said is that this match was about getting the 3 points any way necessary, and Barcelona managed to do that. As bad as it was, they managed to do that. So those are the two camps, Emile, and I think obviously the truth is always somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think in terms of just kind of my emotions and how I feel about last night's game on its own, I'm in the second contingent. This was, Celta, they're not powers, but they're not complete pushovers. And, to be shorthanded as Barca are, to be smack in the middle of two vital Champions League matches with El Clasico looming after that, and then Bayern Munich looming not long after that. Um, this is the kind of 3 points that you throw it on the pile and you're thankful that you have it, and it's just about getting 3 points. I mean, if Barca could win El Clasico and it's worth the same 3 points. I mean, I know it's not emotionally, but this was a job done. I don't even know if it was well done, but it was a job done. But I do agree that there was a lack of incisiveness that when you do step up to competition, can concern you. It's I mean, that was real. There wasn't a great cutting edge. I mean, they got the goal that they needed and sort of slogged their way through. Now, I mean, the hope is obviously that they can put in a better performance. I mean, the performance against Inter, I mean, it flagged horrifically in the second half, I thought. But if at home you can put in an overall performance reminiscent of the more or less of the first half that you played in Inter, or played in Milan, I think you might not love your chances, but you'll take them. You're not going to be completely up the creek. So I think, look, this is a period of suffering. There's severe shortages on the back line. There's need for rotation, need for rest, trying to get guys healthy, and unfortunately, this happens at the most congested and, I don't know, I mean, I guess almost sort of top heavy portion of the schedule. That's bad luck, but I mean, I think they did kind of what they had to do.
Yeah, and there definitely are two camps as well. I think there's a lot less camps who are defending Xavi or making excuses for Xavi, because in truth, I mean, those are excuses to be made as far as the personnel that he has the options of putting out there. I mean, if you frame yesterday's win as a game where Barcelona were being forced to play their fifth choice center back in PK, their third choice right back coming off the bench in Roberto, their third choice left back in Alba, and their second choice left back as a center back, then you do forgive them a bit for understanding that they just had to get through it. But I think because of those big names, because Alba, as much as
two of those guys that you named, they've essentially just brought in from the cold because all the rest of the guys on the back line have been dropping like flies. So it's not even a pure, like, these weren't even guys who were fourth and fifth string or whatever on the depth chart. Xavi had largely relegated these guys to like they were not part of the plan. And now this is kind of an all hands on deck type situation, and that's what these guys are.
Yeah, I mean, and we are still, unfortunately, we are scoping it as it's Jordi Alba. So there are expectations of Jordi Alba because we saw what he was capable of last year. And PK, and again, even the likes of Roberto, you expect that he has to give you something. And then, we'll get into Alonso in a bit. But first, I want to actually almost talk about the goal and talk about what Barca did well in the first half before I really dig into them in the second half. Because in the first half, there was a big difference. Two of the big differences was that Rafinha played on the right, which spacing-wise helped out. I'll get into the issues with that, but I think it was just more important to have him on the right than the left. That was just a bright side.
I like him a lot on the right.
Well, that's where he belongs. He can't be on the left now. But Gabi on the left, as a left interior, that was the big difference that we actually had discussed. Levon and I had discussed last week this time. And so you also saw, as I told you in the second half of the Inter game, Lewandowski was also setting up with moves from the left. Not from the middle, but moves from the left. And that being Barcelona, were overloading that left side with Lewandowski checking two, Gabi with Jordi Alba, and with Alba getting a bit more forward than we actually even do see Balde as far as that heat map goes. Alba lets to get forward a bit more, and obviously got forward way more than Alonso did against Inter Milan. And so Gabi being on that left side as that left interior, while Lewandowski still wasn't really receiving much service, his 3 balls in the opponent's penalty area for the whole game is the worst figure this season. Like, that is a worrying sign for Xavi. That's still the number that concerns me.
Yeah.
But the positive thing is that Gabi was getting vertical in a way that he was not before. He was getting into the spaces, but behind the half spaces, rather, in between the right back and the right center back. He was getting in that space. He was pushing forward, and that was important to stretching out that press from Celta de Vigo in that first half. Now, the downside of that is that it is much easier to pull out a 4-3-3 than it is a 5 at the back, right? A 4 at the back and a Celta 4 at the back that has been shipping goals this season defensively is not the same as an Inter 5 at the back when they're going to be solid and know their personnel. So that is a thing where I go, is that something that Barcelona can carry into this next game? What I am assuming, though, is that we may continue to see Gavi on the left and Pedri on the right, because it seemed that you didn't lose. The worry was that if you move Pedri to the right, you were going to lose some of the things that he does so well and the control that he has over a game, but he was the same.
Yeah,
Pedri was just as good against Inter as he was against Celta from the left to the right, and that is that I think that's the silver lining there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I mean, it's at its core, it's kind of a question of strengthening, how much can you strengthen a weakness? And in doing so, are you, detracting from one of your strengths? Like, are you going from a 9 out of 10 somewhere to, a 7.5 or an 8 in the interest of strengthening elsewhere? I didn't see a drop off in Pedri. So in that sense, I mean, he's effectively interchangeable in both of those positions. And I agree with you. I mean, Gavi looked fantastic on the left. And if you can get marginal improvement across those two positions by making that one switch, I mean, I think that until further notice, sort of just needs to be the plan. And, they're probably that's the pairing we like to see there. And I think they played very well. And I mean, that is what I would go with, at least kind of in this, as we go through the rest of this gauntlet for now, as long as it's working, or even kind of hinting at working.
Well, the concern then, though, with not even Pedri and Gavi, it's not about the individuals. And I think why the ire is rightly on Xavi right now, even with the personnel he has, the spacing is why Barcelona seemed to lose control in that second half, and why they seem to multiple times this season lose control in matches and just survive and just suffer and just get over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
So I did discuss the positioning of Lewandowski, where in the first half, setting up on the left, and he was much more available when Barcelona were doing the overloads on that side. They were switching play a lot better. Piqué was moving the ball well from with those diagonal passes. Alonso doing the same, getting out to the wings, pushing forward, and all those things. And then in the second half, Barcelona not only I think there's a difference between Barcelona taking advantage or working through the wings and then being pushed to the wings. And Barcelona were working through the wings in the first half, and they were pushed to the wings in the second. Because when you're pushed to the wings, that indicates that there is nothing through the central channels. As opposed to in the first half, when the central channels, we saw some progressive passing from Pedri, we saw Busquets working through the middle a bit with Gavi checking back. And so there is nothing through the central channels in that second half. It was just Busquets, Alonso, and Piqué. And what happened there in that second half, I think, I actually had to go back and look at some of it again, because Barcelona did stop building out from the back, surprisingly enough. They stopped building up from the back once Celta began to press in a 4-1-3-2 formation. So Barca would play long to very little success to either Lewandowski or Pedri, and Celta would turn them over and continue to put them under pressure. And as much as I praise Piqué, because I want to get into the good stuff he did in a second, it was actually that big old three, if you will, of Busi, Piqué, and Alba. I think that's kind of where the problems existed here. The ball didn't move quick enough with those three in particular, but the positioning in defensive transition was the issue. Piqué he was great, putting fire out after fire out after fire out, but part of that is him dropping deeper and deeper to make the space. And then Busquets gets stretched when he's both leading the press through the middle and then trying to get back to cover the space there too. So it's not like Busquets is again doing something wrong. This is just a systemic failure when you have Piqué and Busi together. It's why last week, talking to Rafa, we were talking about how is Busi still good? Of course, Busi is still awesome, still amazing, still vital to what Barcelona do. And Messi is arguably still the best player in the world. But fundamentally, together would be a major, major concern, obviously, because of what they can't do anymore defensively on that press and all those things. So the number of times that Barcelona's press broke down, and this is, again, Barca with the ball, or ready to lose the ball, if you will. Right. So the number of times Barca's press broke down before Alonso and Alba, part of that was because Alonso and Alba were marking the same man. And then that third free man for Celta was in the middle of the field to receive and then dribble right at Barcelona. And as I said, if you frame this as Barcelona being forced to play their fifth choice center back and their third choice left back and their second choice left back and center back, then all those things get forgiven. But again, we're seeing this as these are veterans of the game. And unfortunately, what they can't do seems to be not something that Xavi can tweak. I think more concerning that Barcelona are going to have to kind of live with these issues here. And as much as I was excited about I thought Balde was better on the right than he was against Mallorca. I thought there was a marked improvement.
Sure, yeah.
But looking at that, not even the heat map, but looking at the passing network, looking at what he was able to contribute, he was kind of pinched back quite a bit. Wasn't really helpful to Rafinha. Doesn't invert at all, so it's not a body in the middle of the field like Xavi wants. So Balde was literally just trying to hang on as a right back. And the positive thing is if you start a back line against Inter of Balde, of Eric Garcia, of Piqué, and of Roberto, things do get better. Like immediately based on personnel, things do get a little bit better there.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, what you said is interesting. That veteran core is, the shortcomings now they're not questions of understanding or familiarity with the system or even just, tactical know-how. I mean, we're now just dealing with guys who are older and, don't cover the same, and particularly in the case of, like of Piqué, like you said, he drops back and almost creates the space that he then kind of shuts down in a phone booth when the ball gets up on him. I mean, he's still great in a phone booth, but you don't want a speedy, talented, striker or attacker just bearing down on him. And similarly, I mean, look, Busquets was never a burner, and just years and tens of thousands of minutes in, he's still an exceptional player, but he doesn't have the same range. And when Piqué doesn't have the same range as well, it's like you said, there's no longer overlapping circles of their range as Busquets is trying to man multiple parts of the field. So you end up with almost these organic gaps that physically, these guys just physically can't hustle back and plug. And so,
it's not about Busquets. It's not about Busquets like losing athleticism or not being as quick enough. It's about Piqué having lost a half a step, still being a tremendous individual defender and knowing where to be, but having to change his position because he has lost a half a step. And so if Busquets has lost even a third of a step, again, it's not about his athleticism. He was never that athletic. But as you said, the organic gaps have opened up now because multiple players have aged at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't have, and when that happens, very seldom does one of these guys kind of have the sort of the extra tool in his tool belt to plug those gaps. I mean, you end up having to almost scheme around that. And, it's not exactly like basketball, but, like in, if you have a defender, not even necessarily a bad defender, but if you have an intelligent, good defender who is aging and has maybe lost some athleticism, you have to scheme around that a little bit. They're not going to be the same one-on-one on ball. I mean, in this case, Piqué is one-on-one on ball. He's fine, but it's more so as far as closing down space and what do you want to say? Like, I guess diffusing opposing attacks further up the pitch. That's just not a thing that happens very often, because if that doesn't work, then I don't know if he can recover if the attack gets past him. So I mean, it's not even so much. So this is, I think, where Xavi has to get creative, and like we're talking about fifth choice center back, all this. Like there's only so much in the way of resources that he has to deploy, in these areas. I mean, it's probably going to be. I imagine we're going to see De Jong in some role trying to mitigate some of these shortcomings, but. I mean, I don't know but I mean, like you said, bringing in Garcia and Sergio Roberto in place of Alonso and Jordi Alba is just by its very nature is going to be a marginal upgrade at the very least.
Yeah.
So you'll be a little bit better off. I mean, I don't know if that's good enough against Inter, but you'll be better off. You can at least take comfort in that.
Yeah, and then we'll do wings in a second. But actually, speaking of basketball, I think Barcelona should be, while we look for a replacement for Busquets, they should be looking at the French kid, Wembanyama.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know if you saw those two exhibition games. Just as a little aside here, the guy gets from the 3-point line in one stride and is able to block without jumping.
It's unbelievable. Did you see the
he's
photo? 7'4".
He's 7'4". He's making Rudy Gobert, who's 7'2", looked like he's like his little brother.
Yeah.
And I mean, and then he's shooting fadeaway threes in transition from
And
the
with
corner, like
smooth between the leg step back. Did you see the picture of him dunking from, like, I'm pretty sure it was outside the key.
Yeah.
But just with his arm dunking over. I mean,
yeah.
This guy is.
Last point. I know we don't have a basketball, but last thing I want to just mention there is that Emile and I have been covering basketball for a long time. Emile longer than me, and I can tell you that. Listen, I was in high school when there was another guy named LeBron James, or I had just started high school when he was a senior, and so listen, LeBron. That was the biggest thing. I mean, LeBron James in high school at St. Vincent and Mary, like that was the thing. And then in 2007, when Kevin Durant and Greg Oden were coming out of college, coming out of Texas and Ohio State, respectively, with Oden at Ohio State, it was big. It was like, oh, this is huge. This is going to be changing everything. Wembanyama, other than LeBron James, like this is the best prospect I've ever seen. This is a kid who's just, if he stays healthy, that's it. If he stays healthy, this kid is a lock. Multiple-time All-Star, just completely game-changing.
Yeah, I mean,
incredible.
I can't imagine a scenario where he stays healthy for the next 15 years and is not, I mean, I hate to say this when he's that young, but like that looks like a Hall of Fame inner circle legend if he gets a full career.
He had this dream shake. He's hitting like Kevin Garnett 18-foot jumpers, like again, like threes off the back foot in transition. Like
it really is kind of prospects coming into the NBA. You mentioned LeBron. LeBron was the obvious sort of the ultimate kind of space alien, just can't miss. But even when you talk about, when Durant was coming in, is he a little bit too slight? What happens when NBA guys body him up? And I think of LeBron and I think of Shaq when like the guys where you're like, oh yeah, this is just going to work. Like I don't know exactly what's going to happen or what it's going to look like, but there's no way this isn't working.
Can't miss, right? As long as he's on the court, as long as
he's allowed to play, So
all right, well,
I'm glad we were able to gush about him for a second. Yeah.
So where I think Wembanyama, if he did play, I know he played footy in the past, but where he could play again would be in goal because again, if 7'4", that would be helpful. But
cover the whole thing
Barcelona right now, this is the transition. Barcelona right now have a pretty big giant in net right now, where Marc-Andre ter Stegen has been phenomenal. He really has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Stingy. And one of the main, I mean, it's been him and Pedri right now. And when we did the preseason predictions with Frances, the whole thing about ter Stegen was easy because this is with goalkeepers. It's either like, are they back in form? Are they playing well? Or are they not?
Or is he on the way out, basically?
Right. And ter Stegen has fortified himself as the guy in net for Barcelona. Inaki Peña has been good enough to be the backup, with Tenas also floating there for the future. So right now, the goalkeeper situation is really good at Barca. And even yesterday, picks up a knock. Apparently, he's going to be okay. And then that 84th minute kick-out save, which is terrific.
Yes.
It was pressured. It had the moment. He was up to the moment. He got the big save when he needed to. And then even in stoppage time, where there was another save where he punched it over, it was offside, but it didn't matter. Like, he still kept the ball out of the back of the net, regardless of the ways that it came.
I mean, you're not positive in that moment. I mean, he was up to that, I mean, just even still, I mean, they weren't able to put it in the net past him, I mean, even offside or not, like he got to it. He's really dialed in right now, and it's fantastic to watch. I mean, just because, I mean, he's also he is a phenomenal player to watch when he's just at the peak of his powers. I mean, I remember at his very best, what was it, maybe whatever it was, 4 or 5 years ago,
2018 probably.
Yeah, right around then. Yeah, I mean, he was just astounding to watch. I mean, you could just watch him as some of the most entertaining portions of watching Barca. And I love watching him play with confidence, and he has his rhythm, and he doesn't seem to ever be caught leaning the wrong way. Like he's on the tips of his toes. Like he really is. And I mean, as you said, he's just single-handedly saving points for them right now.
Well, I think it helps his narrative because of what Courtois did last year.
Yeah.
That, Barca fans especially, we can sit here and say, Real Madrid, there were so many times last year when they deserved to lose points. And yet Courtois, moment after moment after moment, came up so big for them and won them La Liga. They created distance because of the points that Courtois captured them. And right now, ter Stegen is the reason why Barcelona is top of the table, very much like under Ernesto Valverde when they won that double that one year. It was Messi winning Barcelona points, and it was ter Stegen making sure they did not concede goals. And so this year, to concede just one goal in the Liga, regardless of the teams that they have played so far, you can say, oh, they haven't really faced too many challenges. And with El Clasico, with then Villarreal, it's going to say something different. But right now, he has saved 19 of his 20 shots on target in the Liga this year. That 95% save percentage is the best
amazing.
of anybody in the top 5 European leagues among goalkeepers with 5+ saves. He has been the best goalkeeper in Europe so far to start the year. And when I say in Europe, I mean in the domestic campaign. Because, then in Europe, it's been something totally different, because that goes back to what we talked about before about the systemic problem with Barcelona, that once that competition level goes up, now Barcelona are having a few problems, and even the excellence of Ter Stegen this year cannot say that off. So that's the positive side. And then again, even in front of him, I want to defend Alonso a little bit here. I mean, I want to do this. I know you and I are going to agree on this, but I think Alonso was not something that you and I were excited about. He's on a 1-year deal. I would not have picked him. That's not who I wanted. He shouldn't have started against Inter. It just shut that left wing down a bit too much. Again, Rafinha there as well didn't help. But for Alonso, I think, and I don't want to call anybody out individually, but I'm seeing on Twitter this overcorrection where some of the quote-unquote bigger accounts are so out on Alonso that there's this overcorrection of what he is and what he is useful at for Barcelona. As I said, he had some good balls out of the back against Celta. He stretched them a bit in the first half. Defensively, he didn't do anything wrong. And I think that's where I land on Alonso, that right now he has not done anything fundamentally incorrect. Again, even against Inter, it wasn't his fault. He was just not the personnel or not the profile for that position for that moment, because he doesn't have the dribbling ability to get around that outside back, which is what that position had to do against Inter in that position. So I don't want him to start against Inter, but not because he's not good enough, but because he doesn't fit. And I think that's the only argument that I can make against Alonso, that he just doesn't fundamentally fit in what Barcelona are doing. But we could even see his versatility. That's what made him fit in this squad, because he can play left back, he can play left center back, apparently. And so Xavi's kind of trusting him to break glass in case of emergency, but the glass is shattered, right? Koundé's out, Araujo's out, nobody's fit. So break glass in case of Alonso, and that's where we're at now. But I don't think, again, he's not done anything truly cataclysmic that means he shouldn't be on the field. He should just not be on the field over other players who are currently out injured.
Exactly. And I mean, I think, we talk about, you don't want to make excuses and whatever, but I do keep wanting to come back to just how threadbare this backline is and how kind of scotch taped together the whole thing is. I mean, this is what happens when you're, unquestionably your top 2 defenders are, get hurt at effectively the same time. And then, in the midst of all that, you're trying to cobble things together. And he's simply been miscast. I mean, he's a veteran pro who can do some useful things, but you said it exactly. I mean, this isn't what his job ought to be, but just given the side that he's in, and just given Barca's current predicament, everyone is just being asked to do stuff that might not be, perfectly up their alley. That being said, you're right. He doesn't fit in that role. And that's, I've seen a lot of the Alonso backlash on Twitter. I don't buy into the backlash. I mean, I don't think anyone needs to be turning on him personally, because like you said, it's not that he stinks. He's just useful in other roles. But I mean, Barca don't currently have people for the core roles of defense. And so that's why PK's back. That's why Alonso's being deputized in less than ideal scenarios. That's why, Jordi Alba's back. I mean, this is, I think a lot of this, the complaining about Alonso and, anything like that is, broadly speaking, I think it's a specific way, a specific manifestation of people just wanting to scream that, this stinks. Why are we so racked by injuries at the back? Look at what we've, look at how much we're scrambling. It's just, he unfortunately he winds up being the face of it, I guess. He's front and center and visible as some of the stuff is happening. But I mean, none of it's his doing. I mean, he's there just trying to do a job that he's unfortunately not cut out for.
Yeah, and we've been talking with the Inter Milan thing kind of like looming over all this. We're going to do Rafinha next, because I do kind of set up the Rafinha stuff in the lens of looking ahead to Inter Milan, because against Celta, with Dembele getting a rest out and Ansu also being rotated as well, it was a bit of Ferran Torres, let's see what you can do. And Ferran, I think in the first half, as we continue to say, he created space well, but no end product. Wasn't really that useful. Didn't work well with Alba. So Ferran Torres, it's another, like, cannot trust him at this moment. We just put him down in depth chart. That's the way it is. In the case of Rafinha on the right, I mean, he wasn't great. I mean, I think he obviously is more comfortable there, sure. But he, especially in that second half, faded a bit. And part of that was he did not work well with Balde. Balde, again, not really too comfortable on the right side. Obviously, he's very left-footed.
Yep.
So he was not bringing the ball like around himself the way he needed to. And so Rafinha wasn't awesome. I just want to real quickly on the call, then we'll talk about the Inter stuff and where Rafinha fits there. I was frustrated by the no call on the Javi Gailán tackle because, as you know, and as my listeners know for a long time, there's a lot of calls that people argue about or Sport or Mundo Deportivo put on their cover that, I don't really mention or I don't really cry about or, I don't really even say in my 5 headlines. I'll just pass over it, especially if it doesn't affect the end of a match. But why I was frustrated by that one was you either give the yellow for simulation because if he dove, he dove.
It's one or the other.
Right. Or that's obviously a clear-cut penalty. Like something had to happen in that moment. Like it was
the guy
it was
didn't
enough,
just fall down.
Right. It was not a there's no call at all. It's either it's either he gets punished for he dove and you accuse him of diving, or you go the other direction and it has to be a penalty because he dribbled around him, his leg was out, and it's a clear-cut penalty. And why I'm so frustrated about that is it sounds like I'm whining, and you get obviously it's very Homerish when you argue about a penalty after the fact. Yeah. But I was frustrated in that game because Barcelona were playing well in the first half. They probably earned that penalty. They should have, in theory, Lewandowski buries it, right? And you still have to make the penalty, sure. But in that theory, they're up 2-0 in the same situation. And so that control that they lost over that match when they were up 1-0, I'm not sure if it happens to the same extent if they have a 2-0 lead. Like that changes the complexion of a game. Like one goal does matter in those instances. And I was actually in 2017 at the Camp Nou when the 2-2 draw happened against Celta de Vigo. So I watched in person Celta de Vigo not care about a 2-0 lead. But I think, again, it changed the complexion of a game. And right now, the referees in the Liga have not been good enough. Like I was covering MLS yesterday, and referees were bad. Like it's not even about the league, but there were some really poor officiated games yesterday in MLS. I saw it in the Liga. Like there was just, I think some of these domestic refereeing crews, I know some of them are going to the World Cup, but some of them need a break too. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't usually get on the referees like this, but the officials have not been good in the Liga so far this year. And it's been frustrating. Like it has not been good enough. And it's not just for Barca. Like it's like even against Mallorca. Mallorca had some arguments that things didn't go their way either. So there have been missed calls, as I think this is where I keep to these 5 headlines coming away with when I bring up a call. Like both these games, it seems like games are either well officiated and both sides can say, hey, well, whatever, and it's arguments and we just throw it away.
Yeah, everything balances out. Yeah.
Right. And I agree with that too. I think everything does balance out over the course of a year. But so far, I think there are a bunch of teams who can look at results and say, we were both hard done by because these officials have not been good enough.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there was all the Inter stuff from last week and everything. I mean,
that's Champions League. That's a different crew even.
Yeah, and I mean that's theoretically the apex of the club game. And look, I think there's I don't know how, I don't want to sort of point the finger at VAR and sort of say, but I think the presence of VAR and the trying to figure out how prevalent it's going to be and how it's going to be enforced and implemented. I think referees have simultaneously either gotten super proactive with some calls because they figured that if they got it wrong, VAR might fix it, or they're almost looking over their shoulder at VAR and kind of being maybe a little bit passive and assuming that, like I think the Rafinha, the penalty shot, I think was a perfect call where to me it looked like a penalty. And, of course I'm biased, but still. But I got the impression that the referee was figuring he didn't want to make the call on the pitch. And I think there's a little bit of, well, they'll call me from upstairs if like if I got it wrong. I'm going to err on the side of let them play, and they'll just call me. And I don't know. I feel like that before it used to be referees would make these calls. I mean, just when I saw it in real time, I had no doubt. And then when I looked at it again, sure, Rafinha is fishing for contact a little bit, but like you said, it was something. Like it can't be nothing. It's
Well, I think it's his reputation too a little bit. I think it's not even Rafinha's reputation, but I think there is some kind of bias when you see a Brazilian winger go into the penalty box and go down like that. Like as like that, I think there is some kind
like
of
old flashes of
bias.
Neymar. Just
Right. Well, or almost name any Brazilian winger. I think there is a biased reputation that
yeah.
position, even and that like nationality, does have in those kind of circumstances. I just think even expanded to South American winger, right? You see a South American winger go down after what you feel is questionable contact.
Yeah.
But and it's one thing for the referee, but the VAR, I mean, to your point, like it makes it worse.
Yeah.
That VAR isn't like VAR should be completely getting rid of bias. So even if referees has these illicit bias, like VAR, then get rid of it because you saw the contact.
Yeah, but what's really annoying about it is, there's a little bit of a feeling of you're almost disheartened because you're like, okay, so the referee who was on the pitch saw it from whatever angle he was at, so he didn't think it was. So it's like you guys all in consensus agreed that this was apparently nothing. Mm-hmm. Like this was apparently a no call, which is that's doubly maddening. It's you guys have the benefit of no crowd screaming in your ear, and you can actually sit there and in peace and kind of watch it back a couple of times. How do you arrive at no call play on? And I know they can't give the yellow card retroactively because of VAR, but
well, I mean that's maybe they do have Florentino Perez yelling in their ear. Maybe he is in the VAR.
I mean, there's a very good chance, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, he just won some money. I mean, apparently you're not allowed to record him and ever use any recordings of Florentino in any way that don't reflect very positively upon him.
Yeah, so he gets a little more cash there. So okay, we said all that about Rafinha, but that one play he also had another one like 4 or 5 minutes later that was pretty good as well, a move. But other than like 2 or 3 bright moments from Rafinha, wasn't really a good showing from him. I already kind of got into that, but I think Xavi certainly does have a question on his hand at the forward line. As I said, I think the team kind of against Inter Milan, it's based on the last week and what happened against Inter last week and then this weekend, it writes itself. I mean, obviously Ter Stegen in net. Then, as I said, it's got to be Balde. It's got to be Eric Garcia, PK, at this juncture, and then Sergio Roberto. And then the midfield, it's got to be Gabi on the left, Pedri on the right, Busi as the pivot.
Yep.
And then up top, I think you go with Ansu because even if he's out of form, his positioning has been better, especially coming inside with Balde. That combination against Inter last week kind of worked to good effect.
Yes.
He can come in as that, almost as an attacking number 8, if you will, against that Inter Milan back line. And then you pair him with Lewandowski, and then you put Dembele on the right, and then Rafinha comes off the bench because that is a good option just to throw it in there. And then Frankie de Jong is obviously coming on in like the 60th minute to put out fires, and you hope by that point you're up 2-0, and Frankie and up you close out the game. And I think that is what you're looking at against Inter Milan. Like that's who you have to trust, and that, it kind of writes itself. Like if Xavi doesn't go with that, I'm going to be a bit surprised because I think he's kind of out of answers.
Agreed. And I think, Ansu is struggling for his peak form, obviously, but, like just in watching the games and, reading this and that about, what his physical condition is and everything. So now the talk all seems to be that structurally everything is fine. Like he's back at full strength. There is no sort of lingering this or that. But I guess there was a quote. I don't know if it was from him or from one of the doctors or somebody, but it was saying that he's still struggling to regain his burst, like that electric burst that he had. And while that's true, there was a point in the game yesterday. I want to say it was early in the second half, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it ultimately came to nothing, but he got the ball just outside the Celta box, like not on the left wing, but sort of outside the box, kind of up top, but towards the left corner of the box. And he kind of feinted and crossed over and burst into the box with with a burst that I momentarily thought it was Dembele. And when I saw it was Ansu, I was just over the moon, because even though it didn't come to anything, I was like, okay, good. Like if I'm mistaking explosiveness, Ansu for Dembele, and it's not because Dembele has lost his explosiveness, then that's excellent. And I do think it's now time to. I think Ansu regaining his form, it's a little bit of chicken and egg. I mean, I know Xavi wants him to slowly regain his form and regain his sea legs and integrate him in slowly. But what if he just needs sustained time to get into the flow of the game, just have his rhythm back and get his form back that way? And I'm completely in favor of it, because I don't think there is. First of all, I don't think there's a better option than putting Ansu on the left and Dembele on the right, just given what's available to this team right now. And I also do think that in the interest of now, if you're saying he's back at full physical strength, it's time to treat him at least, like the star that we all kind of expect him to be, that he has shown flashes of being. I mean, I think it's time, and these are huge moments. I mean, this is a superstar making week. I mean, if he finds it and he has a couple of moments against Inter, against Real Madrid, at the Bernabeu, this could be a monumental week for him. And I think it's a gamble worth taking, because I don't see another combination up front that is just screaming to be played ahead of, Ansu, Lewandowski, Dembele.
Well, I mean, I think about taking pressure off Lewandowski in the middle of the field, and Ansu is the only one who can do that. Ansu is the only other forward. I mean, again, Ferran Torres, on paper, in theory, is the man who does that, and people say that, but in practice, in actual physical spacing or considerations of what physically happens, Ansu is the one who can take pressure off Lewandowski. We saw it in the second half against Inter as well, where Ansu can get inside a bit more, or even can set up inside a bit more. He's more of a physical presence inside the box. Like, again, the goal was scored because when Ansu comes on, it does shake everything up. And then Dembele's runs or crosses into that far post make a lot more sense. That's how Pedri scores the goal. So, yes, Ansu is definitely my starter here.
The disallowed goal against Inter was essentially, I mean, Ansu it was just he had a gravity around him. Just there was he sucked in multiple people, and Pedri was just there hanging out when the ball fell to him. The way it shook out sucked, but it was it was kind of a blueprint for what that can be.
Yep. All right. So then, last thing, real quick here. Now, we did not see Pablo Torre, Marc Casado, or Shadi Riyad, and I do want to add this into that. I said it in my 5 headlines. I'm going to repeat it here. That I kind of have to remind myself that I know that I'm excited about these players. I am. Well, Casado, I'm still 50-50 on, but I'm excited about Shadi Riyad. He's just a physical presence, left-footed. Was excited to see him potentially. I mean, I kind of want to see him over Alonso, but I also understand the argument that you cannot sit Alonso with how important he is in the first team at this moment. You cannot sit a player who's formerly played left center back in the Premier League for a 19-year-old making his debut. Like, you cannot do that to a player's confidence. Yeah. Like, you can't do it. For Pablo Torre, as much as we want him to be an answer, I said it last week, we have to be not only patient, but we have to be patient with his adaptation and Xavi's trust for him. Yep. And a reminder, too, that if after 2 months of being at Barcelona, FC Barcelona, if this kid is saying, hey, the club isn't following my game plan or my timeline, or I feel like it's not working, they're not trusting me, and he wants to jump ship after 2 months, like, we have to let those players go. Like, we have to let players that are not willing to be patient and let them thrive somewhere else potentially. So for Pablo Torre, he will get his moments. Again, the Copa del Rey is upcoming. I expect to see all 3 of those in the Copa del Rey. I'm excited to see them in the Copa del Rey. And even in the spring, like, even if it's a battle with for La Liga late on, if Barcelona can get through this week, can be in the Champions League knockout stages, there will come matches where those kind of players will be trusted, especially in theory, in practice, they're going to get more and more comfortable. So they're going to have that month during the World Cup to kind of be in training with Xavi, look at tape, work through things. So, like, I wanted to see them too, that being Torre, Casado, and Riyad against Celta de Vigo. And unfortunately, that game, because it was 1-0, you had to get your regular guys out there. And so, I have to remind myself just to be a bit patient with these guys too. And just because they did not feature today means that they're completely lost to the wilderness.
Yeah, it doesn't mean. Yeah, I don't get the sense that they're completely out of favor. I mean, the Pablo Torre stuff, like you said, is I mean, that's worth monitoring, both just from the acclamation to the club and things like that. It's I mean, you
He does
hope
have to
that
play though. Like he's not playing for Barça Athletic right now either, so he does have to play.
yes, yeah, and I think what you said about the Copa del Rey is right. I mean, I think that's particularly in the early stages of the Copa del Rey where you're playing against lower division opposition a lot of times. Like those are the moments where you let these guys kind of run wild a little bit and sort of just get their feet about them, just get their wits about them, find their footing and kind of see what you have. And ideally, it's like you said, against neither Mallorca nor Celta was there a sizable gap. I mean, Barca was never up, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, where you can just kind of empty the bench a little bit. And, even if you say, what, forget it, even if these guys make a mistake or two and we concede one or two, but, we'll still win 4-2. But you haven't been in that position. I mean, even against Elche, which, I mean, spiritually, that game was probably a 6-7-0 win. They were only up 2-0 until I think it was after the hour mark or right around it. And so you don't have that might be the game where and I do think Xavi, I don't remember exactly which substitutions he made towards the end, but I think he made one or two of these types of substitutions.
Well, that game, one of the narratives that game was like, let Memphis eat. Like that was one of those ones where, I mean, and that's a reminder too, that as much as Casado, I'd love to see him play at the pivot or whatever it may be, like you had to get Frankie de Jong 20 minutes in that game. Yep. And then we saw how important Eric Garcia was coming off the bench and putting out that late fire. Like, no offense to Chadi Wiyad, but put Chadi Wiyad in the exact same circumstance. Does he make the block that Eric Garcia did?
Yeah, agreed. Actually, I'm looking, and no, I stand corrected. Xavi did not make, so Lewandowski made it 3-0 in the 48th minute, but Xavi did not make any such substitutions. It was basically, and like you said, it was let Memphis eat, and he was removed at the hour mark for Ansu, and Eric Garcia for Bellerin, and then Rafinha came on, and Ferran Torres came on in the 72nd. So, I mean,
right, because it's more important to get Ferran Torres a run out than it is to get Pablo Torre a run out, because Ferran Torres,
in a strange way, they're kind of similarly positioned in terms of their psyche and their place in the pecking order at the club. Yeah. And I mean, it's unfortunate, but Ferran Torres is it's a guy you have to figure out how to unlock him, like his confidence, and just get him firing. I mean, he doesn't have to be the best version of himself, but just even kind of a decent version of himself. Because right now he looks. I mean, like I don't want to say like looks broken, but I mean he looks like he's completely bereft of confidence. And I mean those are the moments to do that. But that's kind of but along those lines, it would be nice if Barca had, to your point, against Mallorca or against Celta, been up 3-0, and you can kind of do that, because especially as you are shorthanded, also you can hopefully figure out, ideally one, maybe even two of these guys shows themselves as, if not even not even a spot starter, but if they show themselves to be reliable bench depth, you need that right now, and that would be a massive find and probably a huge boost to the players' confidence as well.
Well, we are talking about Ferran Torres. That means I think it is time to pretty much wrap this up. And we also do end this going full circle on the fact that, it's unfortunate that Barcelona have been uninspired with their performances lately. Like, not only do young players not get a run out, but more significantly, you have a number of important players who are healthy, not injured, who are not in form. So you have both players on the shelf, important players on the shelf, your two most important defenders on the shelf, and you have a ton of players on that attacking line not in form. That's led to some unimpressive performances. So Celta, certainly worried heading into Inter Milan, but as the 11 with the few subs I laid out, Barcelona have got to get a result. That 11 plus have got to be good enough to get something against Inter Milan. So we will have that match review. Look out for those 5 headlines. Then I've got a show on Thursday afterwards. In the meantime, though, give Emile a follow on Twitter through the show notes at the Barcelona Pod, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff for us. Facebook group, all that, Patreon, YouTube channel, merch store, da-da-da-da-da-da. Unfortunately, if you watch on video, this wallpaper not available on the merch store yet, but maybe if people really ask for it, I can have that be a different style or whatever. But anyway, that'll be in different discussions for another time. So thanks so much for listening to the show. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon, and Forza Barça.
Forza Barça.